Hey guys, Ben here with Oddly Armed, and today I have another disassembly video for you, this time of a Robinson Armament XCR-L. So let's go ahead, get into it, and see how this rifle tears apart and how it works. Alright, so we'll go ahead and start out our disassembly here by removing the magazine like always, and then the first step is going to be removing our lower receiver, or at least hinging the upper open, and that's done with this button here at the rear of the receiver. This is actually part of the mainspring, so if we press that in, you can go ahead and hinge the upper and lower receivers apart. And then there's a single captive pin AR style here at the front of the receiver, so we'll go ahead and pop this guy out, which will allow us to separate the upper receiver and the lower receiver. And we'll go ahead and take a quick look at the lower receiver here. So you can see it does have an AR style safety selector here, 45 degree, very nice, and ambi on both sides of the receiver. Also has an ambidextrous AR-15 style magazine release, and then my favorite bolt catch and bolt release out of pretty much any gun on the entire market. So you can see how that actuates there. And then the trigger here is one of the nicest features on the XCR. And it's a very nice trigger that's kind of reminiscent of an AK with the hooks there. But this is a proprietary trigger, so you won't be swapping this out with anything. However, it is incredibly nice from the factory, so this is a trigger you really don't need to swap out. It does use AR-15 style grips, so you can swap that with whatever AR-15 style one you'd like. And then I do have the Fast 2 style stock on this, which is one of their newer models of stocks, and it is side folding, kind of like an FAL. So you just pull up on it, and it'll fold to the side of the receiver. And then if we pull that back down, you can adjust the length of pull by loosening this tension screw, which this is one of my complaints on this rifle because this thing will come loose while you're firing it. It doesn't really do anything, cause any issues. However, it is a little annoying. It does cause it to wobble just a bit, but then you press in these two buttons on either side of the stock and you can slide it in and out for the separate, I believe, 5 separate positions here. And that's really about it. I did add a QD mount here to the right side of the stock, but normally this is just a hole that goes through the stock. And that's really all there is to see with the lower receiver. And moving back to the upper receiver, the next step is going to be taking out our recoil spring, so I can go ahead and pull that straight out the back, and you can see it's a very nice captive spring, kind of reminiscent of an AK, but we'll go ahead and set this aside. And then to remove your bolt carrier group and piston, you go ahead and just pull back the charging handle, so it does have that FAL style charging handle, non-reciprocating on the side there, on the left side. And then we can pull it straight out the back of the receiver. And at this point, we can actually go ahead and just take our gas piston here. So it is a long stroke gas piston rifle, so just like an AK. And that is all we need to do to pull the bolt out. So the bolt is actually being retained in the carrier with the piston. So you can see this protrusion at the front. When it's connected, it blocks the bolt from coming out. So we just remove that and the bolt will come straight out of the carrier. And here's the XCR bolt, and as you can see, it's actually fairly reminiscent of an AK style bolt. And just for example here, I do have the bolt from my PSA crank, so you can see from the face of the bolt, it's fairly similar with the extractor there, and then the cutout for the fixed ejector. And it does have a 3-lug bolt. The lugs are a little bit differently shaped, but it works essentially the same way. And then the cam is here on the rear of the bolt versus on the head of the bolt as it is on the AK. And then the firing pin is actually retained in the carrier on the XCR versus the AK, which has the floating firing pin inside of the bolt itself. So these are definitely fairly similar in some ways, particularly with the locking lugs, but there are some differences. And to finish disassembling our carrier here, so you can see our firing pin is inside of the channel there in the center. There is a single non-captive pin here, and I'm going to use my totally not janky punch here to go ahead and press that through. So we'll go ahead and push that through, and here's that non-captive pin, at which point you can go ahead and push on the firing pin and it's going to come out the back of the carrier right here. And for the firing pin, you can see it does have this little collar here at the back. There is a spring in there, so it is spring loaded. However, that's held in with a roll pin, so there's no reason to take that out if you don't absolutely need to. Now moving back to the carrier itself, you can see there is a little rubber buffer at the end here, so that kind of deadens the impact when it hits the rear of the receiver. To take that out, all you have to do is press down on it when the firing pin's removed, and you can see it just fits into a little slot there at the top of the carrier. And that's all you have to do to disassemble the bolt carrier on the XCR. And the last thing that we're going to do is remove the barrel on the XCR, which is incredibly easy to do, and that is done with just this screw here at the back of the receiver. Now you can see I do have a paint line on there, and that's just to get it back to the same spot so I can go ahead and hopefully retain zero with this thing. This utilizes either 240 inch-pounds as far as the torque spec goes, which I don't have a wrench that goes up that high because that's really high for a wrench. They also say to just turn it about 70 degrees past where it starts tightening. However, I just wanted to put the line on here so it'd be a little bit more repeatable there. So I'm going to go ahead and put my wrench in there, and then we just turn it. It's a little bit tight because, again, 240 inch-pounds approximately. And we'll go ahead and rotate that. It takes a couple of turns here before it'll pull out the front. And then we'll see if that gets us there. Yep, we're good. And you just pull the barrel as well as the piston. Sometimes it comes with it, or the gas tube here. Sometimes it comes with, sometimes it doesn't. And we can go ahead and pull the gas tube off. So just a couple of holes in there. There are different lengths of gas tubes depending on which length of barrel and receiver that you have. But that's pretty much all you have to do to remove the barrel on the XCR-L. And these are my two barrels for the XCR-L. The top one here is going to be my 5.56 barrel, and then the bottom one is the 300 blackout barrel. And these use the same length gas system, so it uses the same gas tube for this. Depending on what your barrel length and receiver is, you might have a different gas tube to be able to make this work. However, there are different gas blocks depending on the generation that you have, and there's even one that utilizes what looks like a short stroke gas piston versus a long stroke. But there is a little difference between mine. For the 5.56 barrel, there is a detent right there that you have to press in to be able to rotate the gas plug. And there are 8 separate settings. There's a 0, so an off, all the way up to 7. And that just adjusts the amount of gas that you're getting in there. But again, the detent is in my 5.56, so I can't rotate it. However, the 300 blackout here, I don't have that detent in there, you can see, so I can freely rotate it between the positions. There's still internal detent, but it doesn't lock it. So that means while it's in the receiver, I can actually rotate and change the gas setting on my 300 blackout barrel. However, on the 5.56, I actually have to remove it from the receiver to be able to swap to a different gas setting on it, or I have to very awkwardly try and get something in there to push that detent to turn it. So depending on which model you have, that can be a little bit annoying. And real quickly, I just want to give you guys a good look on the inside of the receiver here. So you can see it is fairly tight. You can see the 2 screws on the outside here, which hold in our fixed ejector, so you can swap that out. However, they are very much red Loctited in there, so that will be kind of a pain to remove. And it's probably something you might want Rob Arms to do for you, but you can pull that out. Inside the receiver, this channel here is very tight, so getting into this upper section in there is going to be very difficult to clean. Other than that, it's fairly easy to get in there. You can see into the place where the barrel holds, so it's very easy to get in there to clean everything off. And then the front of the receiver, of course, there's nothing up there, so everything is pretty easy to clean from that perspective. And then this also has different shell deflectors, so you can swap these out depending on which caliber you have. And that's pretty much all there is to see on the upper receiver. Alright guys, and that is the Robinson Armament XCR-L fully disassembled. So thank you for checking out this video. Please like, share, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and I will have more content coming out for you guys in the near future.